When a billionaire's daughter ran away from her golden cage to prove she could survive without money, she found herself serving food in a roadside kitchen, where the one man who made her heart race had no idea she was worth millions. But secrets this big don't stay buried forever, and the truth was about to cost her everything she'd built. You're watching Folktale Dawn. If you love powerful African stories, subscribe now. There was a girl named Zainab, and she had everything you could think of: money, cars, clothes, and a huge house in Lagos with so many rooms that even she didn't know what was in all of them. Her father, Chief Adegoke, was one of the richest men in Nigeria. People treated Zainab like a princess, but she didn't feel like one. To her it was all fake. Everyone around her only seemed to care about her money, not who she really was. One evening, Zainab sat in her massive bedroom staring out of the window. The city lights of Ikoyi sparkled, but they didn't make her feel happy. Her mother had just told her that Chief Adegoke wanted her to meet another rich businessman's son, someone they thought would be perfect for her. Zainab didn't even know the boy's name yet, but she already hated the idea. She sighed, running her fingers through her soft braids. Why can't they just let me live my life? Why does everything have to be about money? She muttered to herself. Suddenly, the door burst open and her mother, Mrs. Adegoke, walked in. She was dressed in a bright green lace dress, her gold jewelry clinking with every step. Zainab, you're still in your room? Didn't I tell you to come downstairs? Your father wants to talk to you. Zainab rolled her eyes but stood up. She knew better than to ignore her parents. What does Daddy want this time? Mrs. Adegoke looked at her daughter and sighed. It's about your future. You're not getting any younger, Zainab. You need to settle down with someone who can take care of you. Take care of me? Zainab snapped, her voice rising. Mommy, I can take care of myself. I don't need some random rich boy to marry me. I don't even know him. Her mother frowned, her perfectly shaped brows furrowing. Don't raise your voice at me, Zainab. We're doing this for your own good. Do you know how many girls would kill to have the life you have? You're being ungrateful. Zainab's chest tightened with anger. Ungrateful? Because I don't want to be married off like I'm some kind of property? At that moment, Chief Adegoke's deep voice echoed from the hallway. What's going on here? He stepped into the room, towering over both of them. His presence was commanding, and Zainab instantly felt her frustration bubble over. Daddy, you can't keep controlling my life like this, Zainab said, trying to keep her voice steady. I want to live for myself, not for what you think is best for me. Chief Adegoke's face darkened. And what exactly do you know about living life, Zainab? Do you know how hard I've worked to give you this life? Do you know the sacrifices I've made? And now you're telling me you don't want to listen to us. I never asked for all of this, Zainab shouted, tears stinging her eyes. I didn't ask to be born into this family. I just want to be myself. Is that too much to ask? Her father's eyes narrowed. You're acting like a child. You think the world out there is easy? You wouldn't last a day without the comfort we've given you. Zainab's fists clenched at her sides. Maybe I need to find out for myself then. Her parents looked at her like she had lost her mind. Mrs. Adegoke placed a hand on her husband's arm. She doesn't mean that, darling. She's just being dramatic. But Zainab meant every word. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She had to get out of there. She had to prove to herself and to her parents that she could survive without their money. The next morning, Zainab woke up with a plan. She packed a small bag with a few clothes, leaving behind all her designer outfits and expensive shoes. She stuffed a notebook and pen into the bag, along with a little money she had saved from her allowance. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, not even her best friend, Funk. The less anyone knew, the better. As she stood at the front door, she took a deep breath. The house was quiet, and her parents were still asleep. She slipped out, the weight of her decision pressing on her shoulders. She took a cab to Mushin, a busy area far from her family's wealthy neighborhood. The streets were noisy and crowded with people hustling to make a living. It was a world completely different from the one Zainab had always known. She found a small guest house and paid for a room. It was nothing like her room back home, just a bed, a fan, and a tiny bathroom. But to Zainab it felt like freedom. A few days later, Zainab began looking for a job. She walked into shops, kiosks, and restaurants, asking if they needed help. Most people turned her away, saying she looked too soft for the kind of hard work they needed. Finally, she came across Mama Ngozi's kitchen, a small buka with a faded signboard and the smell of freshly cooked jollof rice wafting through the air. Zainab stepped inside, her heart pounding. Mama Ngozi, a stout woman with a kind face, stood behind the counter wiping her hands on a bright yellow apron. She looked up as Zainab entered. Yes, what do you want? Mama Ngozi asked, her voice firm but not unkind. I'm looking for a job, Zainab said nervously. Mama Ngozi raised an eyebrow. You want to work here? Yes, Ma, Zainab replied, trying to sound confident. Mama Ngozi studied her for a moment. You don't look like someone who knows how to hustle. Are you sure you can handle this kind of work? I can learn, Zainab said quickly. I'll do anything. Mama Ngozi chuckled. We'll see. Come tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. sharp. If you're late, don't bother coming back. Thank you, Ma. I won't be late, Zainab said, relief washing over her. The next morning, Zainab arrived at the buka before sunrise, dressed in a plain t-shirt and jeans. The work was harder than she had imagined. She had to carry heavy trays, wash endless plates, and deal with impatient customers who shouted their orders. By the end of the day, her arms ached and her feet felt like they were on fire. But as she lay in her tiny guesthouse room that night, she smiled to herself. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was doing something real. Zainab didn't know what the future held, but she was determined to prove to herself and to her parents that she was more than just the billionaire's daughter. The next morning, Zainab stood outside Mama Ngozi's kitchen at exactly 5:45 a.m., watching the sky slowly turn from deep blue to the soft orange of dawn. The air was cool and the streets of Mushin were just waking up. She felt nervous but determined. Mama Ngozi arrived a few minutes later, a large basket of fresh vegetables balanced on her hip. She raised her eyebrows when she saw Zainab. So you're serious about this job? Yes, Ma, Zainab replied quickly, trying to hide the butterflies in her stomach. Good. Follow me inside. Zainab followed Mama Ngozi into the kitchen, which was already buzzing with activity. A tall, wiry man was chopping onions at lightning speed, while another woman, stout and stern-looking, was stirring a giant pot of soup. The delicious smells of spices and freshly cooked rice filled the air. Mama Ngozi clapped her hands. Everyone, this is Hawa, the new girl. She says she wants to work here. Let's see if she can handle it. The stout woman, who Zainab later learned was Blessing, snorted. She doesn't look like she's ever carried anything heavier than a handbag. Zainab's cheeks burned, but she forced a smile. I'll do my best, Ma. Blessing didn't look impressed. We'll see. Zainab's first task was simple, sweeping the floor. Easy, she thought. The kitchen was small but cluttered with crates of vegetables, sacks of rice, and large cooking pots. As Zainab tried to maneuver the broom around the tight spaces, she accidentally knocked over a bucket of water. Hey! Blessing shouted, her hands on her hips. Are you trying to flood the kitchen? I'm so sorry, Zainab said quickly, grabbing a mop to clean up the mess. Mama Ngozi shook her head but didn't say anything. The wiry man chopping onions, whose name was Emeka, chuckled under his breath. First day and you're already causing wala. Zainab tried to laugh along, but her heart sank. She had barely started and she was already messing up. As the morning rush began, Zainab was given her next task, serving food to customers. The buka quickly filled up with people, construction workers, traders and Okada riders, all shouting their orders. The noise was overwhelming. Madam, bring me rice and beans, one man shouted, waving his hand. Sister, where is my EBA and egusi? I've been waiting, another called out. Zainab hurried from table to table, balancing trays of food. But her inexperience showed. She tripped over a chair leg and nearly dropped a plate of jollof rice. Be careful, the customer scolded, glaring at her. I'm so sorry, Zainab mumbled, setting the plate down. By the end of the morning, Zainab felt like she had run a marathon. Her arms ached from carrying heavy trays, and her feet throbbed from walking back and forth. But she didn't complain. As she sat on a stool in the corner, catching her breath, Blessing walked over, arms crossed. You're not cut out for this, girl. You should just go back to wherever you came from. Zainab looked up at her, determination flashing in her eyes. I'm not going anywhere. Blessing raised an eyebrow. We'll see about that. Despite the tough start, Zainab refused to give up. Every day she woke up early, determined to get better. She learned how to carry multiple plates without spilling, how to deal with rude customers, and how to keep the kitchen clean. Slowly, she started earning the respect of her coworkers. Even Blessing began to soften, though she would never admit it. One afternoon, as the lunch rush died down, Mama Ngozi pulled Zainab aside. You're a hard worker, Hawa. I can see that. But you need to toughen up. This isn't a place for soft people. I understand, Ma, Zainab said. Thank you for giving me a chance. Mama Ngozi nodded. You'll do fine. Just don't let Blessing scare you off. She's tough on everyone. Zainab smiled, feeling a small spark of hope. Over the weeks, Zainab began to find a rhythm in her new life. The buka became like a second home, and her coworkers became like family. While Blessing still loved to tease her, and Emeka never missed an opportunity to crack a joke at her expense. But Zainab didn't mind. She was learning, and that was all that mattered. One evening after the buka had closed for the day, Zainab sat on a bench outside enjoying the cool breeze. Emeka joined her, a toothpick dangling from his mouth. "So, Hawa," he said leaning back, "you've been working here for a while now. What's your story? Why did you decide to work in a place like this?" Zainab hesitated. She couldn't tell him the truth, that she was a billionaire's daughter trying to escape her privileged life. Instead, she said, "I just wanted to try something different." Emeka nodded, though he didn't look convinced. Different? Well, you're doing okay so far. Just don't let Blessing bully you too much." Zainab laughed. "I won't." But life at the buka wasn't all smooth sailing. One afternoon, a particularly rude customer came in. He was a middle-aged man with a loud voice and a short temper. "Where's my food?" he barked, slamming his hand on the table. Zainab rushed over with his plate of umla and yudu. "Here you go, sir." The man barely looked at her. "What took you so long? Do you think I have all day?" "I'm sorry, sir," Zainab said politely. "Sorry for yourself," he muttered, digging into his food. As she walked away, Zainab felt her frustration bubbling inside her. She wanted to snap back at him, but she knew she couldn't. This job was important to her, and she wasn't going to let anyone ruin it. That evening, as Zainab walked back to her guest house, she thought about how far she had come. She was no longer the spoiled girl who had everything handed to her. She was learning how to work hard, how to deal with difficult people, and how to stand on her own 2 feet. But deep down she wondered how long she could keep this up. Would her parents ever forgive her for leaving? And would she ever find what she was truly looking for? As she unlocked the door to her small room, Zainab took a deep breath. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew one thing: she was exactly where she needed to be. The morning sun shone brightly over Mama Ngozi's kitchen, and Zainab was already busy serving food to a growing crowd. The buka was alive with noise, the clatter of plates, customers shouting their orders, and Blessing barking instructions from the kitchen. Zainab had learned to keep her head down and focus on her work, even when customers were rude or impatient. As she carried a tray of steaming jollof rice and fried plantain to a table, she noticed someone new walk into the buka. He was tall and slim, wearing a grease-stained t-shirt and jeans. His skin was dark and smooth, and he had a smile so bright that Zainab almost dropped the tray she was holding. The man looked around, then walked up to the counter. "Good afternoon, ma. Please, 1 plate of rice and beans with dodo." Zainab quickly turned back to her work, feeling her cheeks flush. She didn't know why she was so flustered. It wasn't like she hadn't seen handsome men before. But something about this man's easy smile and calm voice made her heart skip. Blessing smirked as she handed the plate of food to Zainab. "Don't just stand there. Go and serve him." Zainab shot her a glare but took the plate and walked over to the man's table. "Here's your food, sir," she said, placing the plate in front of him. The man looked up at her and smiled again. "Thank you, Madam Waitress." Zainab blinked, caught off guard by his warm tone. "You're welcome," she said quickly before hurrying back to the counter. As the lunch rush died down, the man stayed at his table, eating slowly and scrolling through his phone. Zainab couldn't help but steal glances at him every now and then. Blessing noticed and nudged her playfully. "You like him, don't you?" Blessing whispered. "What?" "No, I don't," Zainab replied, her voice too quick and defensive. Blessing laughed. "You're not a very good liar, Hawa." Zainab rolled her eyes and turned away, but her heart was racing. She didn't even know the man's name, and already Blessing was teasing her. When the man finished his food, he walked back to the counter to pay. "Thank you for the food," he said, handing over some Naira notes. "It was very good." "You're welcome," Mama Ngozi replied with a smile. "Come back anytime." The man turned to Zainab and said, "You serve food like a pro. I'll definitely be back." Zainab laughed nervously. "Thank you, sir." "I'm Tunde," he said, holding out his hand. Zainab hesitated for a moment, then shook his hand. "I'm Hawa." "Nice to meet you, Hawa," Tunde said, his smile as warm as the afternoon sun. Then he turned and walked out of the buka, leaving Zainab feeling strangely light-hearted. That evening, as Zainab cleaned up the tables, Emeka came over with a mischievous grin. "So, Hawa, who was that fine gentleman you were smiling at earlier?" Zainab groaned. "Emeka, don't start." "I'm just saying," Emeka said, holding up his hands in mock defense. He seemed to like you. Did you see the way he was smiling at you? Zainab tried to hide her smile. He was just being polite. Polite? We'll see if he comes back tomorrow. The next day Tunde did come back. This time he ordered EBA and egusi soup and sat at the same table as before. Zainab tried to stay focused on her work, but she couldn't ignore the way her heart fluttered whenever she walked past him. When she brought his food to the table, he smiled up at her. Thank you, Hawa. You're becoming my favorite waitress. Zainab laughed nervously. It's my job, sir. Call me Tunde, he said. No need for all the sir stuff. Okay, Tunde, Zainab said, feeling her cheeks warm. As she walked away, she heard Emeka chuckling behind the counter. Favorite waitress? Hawa, you're in trouble. Over the next few weeks, Tunde became a regular at the buka. He came almost every day, always sitting at the same table and ordering something different each time. He and Zainab started talking more, their conversations growing longer with each visit. One afternoon, when the buka was less busy, Tunde asked, So, Hawa, how did you end up working here? You don't seem like the usual type. Zainab froze for a moment. She couldn't tell him the truth about who she really was. She had to think fast. I just needed a fresh start, she said carefully. Tunde nodded, his expression thoughtful. I get that. Sometimes you just need to step away and figure things out. Zainab smiled, relieved that he didn't push further. What about you? What do you do? I'm a mechanic, Tunde said. I work at a small workshop down the road. It's nothing fancy, but it pays the bills. A mechanic? Zainab said, her interest piqued. Do you like it? Tunde grinned. I love it. Cars are my passion. One day, I'm going to open my own auto repair shop, a big one with all the latest equipment. Zainab admired the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his dream. That's amazing. I'm sure you'll make it happen. Tunde chuckled. I hope so. But it's not easy. It takes a lot of hard work and money. And I don't have much of either right now. You'll get there, Zainab said, her voice sincere. Their friendship grew quickly after that. Every time Tunde came to the buka, he and Zainab would talk about their dreams, their struggles, and everything in between. Zainab found herself looking forward to his visits, even on the busiest days. One evening, as they sat outside the buka after closing, Tunde asked, Do you ever think about the future, Hawa? Where you want to be in 5 or 10 years? Zainab hesitated, unsure how to answer. I guess I just want to be happy, she said finally. Tunde smiled. That's a good goal. Happiness is everything. Zainab looked at him, feeling a warmth in her chest that she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in her life, she felt like someone saw her for who she really was, not for her family's wealth or status. But even as she enjoyed Tunde's company, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. How long could she keep her secret? The following morning at Mama Ngozi's kitchen, the sun rose like any other day, casting golden rays through the buka's wide-open doors. Zainab was already wiping down tables, her movements quick and focused. She hummed softly to herself, a tune she couldn't quite place as the day's work began. Tunde's visits had become the highlight of her routine, though she tried not to show it. Her heart raced a little every time she heard the bell above the door ring, hoping it was him. She told herself it was just friendship, nothing more. But the way his smile lingered in her mind told a different story. As customers trickled in, the noise level rose, orders were shouted, plates clattered, and the kitchen smelled of peppery soups and fried plantains. Zainab barely noticed the chaos because her thoughts kept drifting back to the conversations she'd had with Tunde the day before. When the bell above the door jingled, Zainab glanced up. There he was, Tunde in his usual grease-stained t-shirt and jeans, his smile as warm as ever. He walked straight to the counter where Mama Ngozi was busy taking orders. Good morning, Ma, he said, his voice deep but cheerful. I'll take the usual today, jollof rice, plantains, and chicken. Coming right up, Mama Ngozi said, scribbling the order down. She turned to Zainab. Hawa, serve him. He seems to like you best. Zainab tried not to blush as she took the plate and walked over to Tunde's usual table. Your usual, she said, setting it down carefully. Thank you, Hawa, Tunde said, flashing her a grin. I think you know my order better than I do. Zainab laughed nervously. Maybe you should try something new next time. Why change a good thing? Tunde teased, picking up his fork. Zainab lingered for a moment, pretending to adjust the tray in her hands. She liked talking to Tunde even if it was just for a few seconds. But before she could think of something else to say, Blessing's voice rang out from the kitchen. Hawa, stop standing there like a statue and get back to work. Zainab sighed and turned away. Enjoy your food, she said quickly before hurrying back to the counter. Later that afternoon, when the buka was quieter, Tunde stayed behind as usual, scrolling through his phone while sipping a cold bottle of malt. Zainab used the opportunity to clean the tables near him, hoping for a chance to talk. "So, Hawa," Tunde said, breaking the silence, "do you ever take a break? You're always running around." Zainab smiled, wiping down the table next to his. "Breaks aren't part of the job description here." "Well, you deserve one," Tunde said, leaning back in his chair. "You work harder than anyone else I've seen." Zainab laughed. "Tell that to Blessing. She thinks I'm too slow." "Blessing? That one will complain about anything," Tunde said with a chuckle. "Don't let her get to you." Zainab appreciated his kindness. "Thanks. I'll try." Tunde set his bottle down and looked at her curiously. "You know, you never told me why you decided to work here. You don't seem like the typical buka girl." Zainab hesitated, her hands tightening around the cloth she was using to clean. "I just wanted something different," she said finally. "A chance to start fresh." Tunde nodded thoughtfully. "I get that. Sometimes stepping away from the familiar is the only way to grow." Zainab felt a wave of relief. He didn't push her for more details and she was grateful. The truth about her past was something she wasn't ready to share. Not yet. Days turned into weeks, and Tunde became a constant presence in Zainab's life. He showed up at the buka almost every day, always with the same warm smile and easygoing charm. Their conversations grew longer, and Zainab found herself looking forward to them more than she wanted to admit. One quiet afternoon, when the buka was nearly empty, Tunde sat at his usual table, tinkering with something in his hands. Zainab couldn't resist her curiosity and walked over. "What's that?" she asked, gesturing to the small device in his hands. "It's a carburetor," Tunde said, holding it up for her to see. "It's part of a car engine. I'm trying to fix it." Zainab tilted her head, intrigued. "Do you always carry car parts around?" Tunde laughed. "Sometimes. I was working on a car earlier, and I wanted to take this home to figure out why it's not working properly." "You must really love what you do," Zainab said, sitting down across from him without thinking. "I do," Tunde said, his expression softening. "Fixing cars isn't just a job for me. It's my passion. I've always loved figuring out how things work." Zainab admired the way his face lit up when he talked about his work. "That's amazing," she said sincerely. "I wish I was as passionate about something as you are." Tunde looked at her thoughtfully. "You will be. Sometimes it just takes time to figure out what makes you truly happy." Zainab felt a pang of guilt. Tunde had no idea who she really was or why she was working at the buka. But his words touched her and she nodded. "Maybe you're right." As their friendship grew, so did the teasing from Blessing and Emeka. "You two talk like you've known each other forever," Emeka said one day, leaning against the counter. "Are we invited to the wedding?" Zainab nearly dropped the tray she was holding. "Emeka, stop it." Blessing smirked. "He's not wrong, you know. That Tunde boy likes you." Zainab shook her head, her cheeks burning. "We're just friends." "Friends?" Blessing said, dragging out the word. "Sure, Hawa. Keep telling yourself that." Zainab tried to ignore them, but the truth was she wasn't sure what she and Tunde were anymore. Their conversations had become more personal, more meaningful. She felt a connection with him that she couldn't explain. But she was terrified of what would happen if he found out the truth about her. One evening, after the buka had closed, Tunde offered to walk Zainab home. The streets were quiet, and the cool night air felt refreshing after a long day. "Thank you for walking me," Zainab said, glancing at him. "It's nothing," Tunde said with a shrug. "I just want to make sure you get home safely." They walked in silence for a moment, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the empty street. "Hawa," Tunde said suddenly, breaking the silence, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," Zainab said, though her heart began to race. "Do you ever feel like you're hiding from something?" Zainab froze, her breath catching in her throat. "What do you mean?" Tunde looked at her, his expression serious. "I don't know. Sometimes it feels like there's more to you than you let on. Like you're carrying some big secret." Zainab's chest tightened. She wanted to tell him everything, but fear held her back. "Everyone has secrets," she said softly. "It doesn't mean they're bad." Tunde nodded, but he didn't look convinced. "I just hope you know you can trust me." Zainab swallowed hard, her emotions swirling inside her. "I know," she said quietly. They reached her guest house and Tunde smiled at her. "Good night, Hawa." "Good night, Tunde," Zainab replied, watching as he walked away. As she closed the door behind her, Zainab leaned against it, her heart heavy. She had never felt this close to someone before, but the weight of her secret threatened to destroy everything. She didn't know how much longer she could keep up the lie. The next morning, Zainab woke up feeling a strange mix of emotions. The cool morning breeze swept through her tiny guesthouse room, but it didn't calm her racing thoughts. Tunde's words from the night before echoed in her head. Do you ever feel like you're hiding from something? She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. There was no point dwelling on it now. She had work to do, and as always the buka would be busy. At Mama Ngozi's kitchen, the day started like any other. The smell of fried akara and freshly cooked rice filled the air, and customers streamed in, shouting their orders. Zainab focused on serving food and cleaning tables, her mind still preoccupied with Tunde. As the lunch rush slowed, the sound of a familiar voice made Zainab look up. There he was, Tunde, standing at the counter with his easy smile. Good afternoon, Ma, he said to Mama Ngozi. The usual, please. Zainab felt her heart lift just seeing him, but as she grabbed his plate and headed to his table, she couldn't ignore the small knot of guilt tightening in her chest. Your usual, she said with a small smile, placing the plate in front of him. Thanks, Hawa, Tunde replied. He hesitated for a moment before saying, Can you sit for a minute? I have something to tell you. Zainab blinked, surprised. I guess I can. She glanced around, making sure Blessing wasn't watching, then slid into the seat across from him. Tunde leaned forward, his expression serious. Something happened yesterday. What is it? Zainab asked, her voice quiet. Tunde sighed, running a hand through his short hair. My workshop, it got demolished. What? Zainab exclaimed, her hand flying to her mouth. Tunde sighed, running a hand through his short hair. The landlord sold the land to some big company. They didn't even give us proper notice. One day I was working on a car and the next, bulldozers were tearing everything down. Zainab's chest tightened. She could see the pain in his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world was on them. Tunde, I'm so sorry. That's awful. He nodded. It's not just me. My team, my customers, they're all affected. I've lost my main source of income and I don't know what to do next. Zainab's mind raced. She wanted to help him, but how? If she revealed who she really was, would he accept her help? Or would he feel betrayed? Is there anything I can do? She asked softly. Tunde gave her a small, sad smile. Thanks, Hawa, but this is something I have to figure out on my own. I'll manage somehow. That evening, after the buka closed, Zainab couldn't stop thinking about Tunde's situation. She sat on her bed, staring at her notebook where she had jotted down ideas for helping him. But no matter how much she thought about it, one thing was clear. She couldn't let him struggle alone. The next morning, Zainab woke up early, determined to do something. She pulled out her phone and made a call she hadn't made in months. Hello, Funk, she said when her best friend picked up. Zainab? Funk's voice was full of surprise. Where have you been? Do you know how worried I've been? I'm sorry, Zainab said quickly. I promise I'll explain everything later. But right now, I need your help. Funk sighed. Of course. What do you need? I need to get in touch with my father's company. They're starting some kind of entrepreneur competition, right? Yes, I heard about that, Funk said. Why? There's someone I want to help, Zainab said. I need to make sure he gets a chance to win. Funk was quiet for a moment. You're really serious about this, aren't you? I am, Zainab said firmly. Please, Funk. Can you help me? Okay, Funk said finally. I'll see what I can do. A few days later, the announcement came. A local entrepreneur competition was being held, with a cash prize to help the winner start or grow their business. Tunde heard about it while talking to a friend, and his eyes lit up with hope. Hawa, he said excitedly when he came to the buka that afternoon, did you hear about the competition? Zainab nodded, pretending she hadn't already known. Yeah, I did. Are you going to enter? Of course, Tunde said, his smile wide. This could be my chance to rebuild my workshop. I just need to put together a strong business plan. I know you'll do great, Zainab said, her heart swelling with pride. Over the next week, Tunde worked tirelessly on his application. Zainab offered to help, and they spent hours at the buka after closing, going over ideas and strategies. What do you think of this? Tunde asked one night, showing her a draft of his business plan. Zainab read it carefully, nodding. It's really good. You've thought of everything, your budget, your goals, even how you'll market your services. Tunde grinned. Thanks. I couldn't have done it without your help. Zainab smiled back, but the guilt in her chest grew heavier. She was helping him, yes, but she was also keeping a big secret from him. She told herself it was for his own good, but deep down she wasn't sure if that was true. When the day of the competition arrived, Zainab watched from the sidelines as Tunde presented his plan to the judges. He spoke with confidence and passion, his love for his work shining through every word. When the results were announced, Zainab held her breath. And the winner is Tunde Adeyemi. The crowd erupted into applause, and Zainab felt a surge of relief and joy. Tunde had done it. As he accepted the prize, Tunde looked over at Zainab and gave her a thumbs up. Her heart swelled with pride, but the small voice in the back of her mind reminded her that her secret was still there, waiting to be uncovered. That evening, as they celebrated with bottles of malt and plates of suya, Tunde pulled Zainab aside. "Hawa," he said, his voice soft, "I don't know how to thank you. You've been there for me every step of the way. I couldn't have done this without you." Zainab felt a lump in her throat. "You did all the hard work, Tunde. You deserve to win." He looked at her, his eyes full of gratitude. "You're more than a friend, Hawa. You're special." Zainab's heart skipped a beat, but before she could respond, Emeka called out, "Tunde, come take a picture with your trophy." Tunde smiled at her one last time before joining the others. Zainab watched him, her emotions swirling inside her. She was happy for him, but the guilt of her secret was heavier than ever. She didn't know how much longer she could keep it from him. The night of the celebration, Zainab couldn't sleep. The tiny room in her guest house felt even smaller, its walls pressing in on her. Tunde's words echoed in her mind, "You're more than a friend, Hawa. You're special." She wanted to feel happy, she should feel happy, but the secret she had been keeping made her stomach churn. She had helped him win, but she hadn't been completely honest. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized she couldn't keep hiding the truth. "I have to tell him," she whispered to herself in the dark. The next morning, as she walked to Mama Ngozi's kitchen, Zainab rehearsed what she would say to Tunde. She imagined his reaction. Would he be angry? Or would he ever speak to her again? Her thoughts were interrupted when she arrived at the buka and saw Tunde already there, sitting at his usual table. He looked up and smiled as she walked in. "Good morning, Hawa," he said, his voice warm. "Good morning, Tunde," Zainab replied, forcing a smile. She felt her palms grow clammy as she grabbed an apron and got to work. Tunde kept stealing glances at her. After a while, he stood and walked over to the counter where she was cleaning plates. "Hawa," he said softly, "can we talk?" Zainab froze, her heart pounding. Sure," she said, putting down the cloth she was holding. Tunde led her outside to the small bench behind the buka. The morning air was cool, and the street was quiet except for the occasional honk of a passing car. "I've been thinking," Tunde began, his hands fidgeting nervously. "Ever since the competition, I've been trying to figure out how I got so lucky. It's not just the prize. You've been there for me through everything. And now, I feel like I can't keep this to myself anymore." Zainab's breath hitched. Was he about to? "I care about you, Hawa," Tunde said, his voice steady. "More than a friend. You've become such an important part of my life, and I don't want to imagine it without you." Zainab stared at him, her heart racing. She had dreamed of hearing these words, but not like this. Not with the weight of her secret looming over them. "Tunde," she began, her voice shaky, "there's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" he asked, his brows furrowing with concern. Zainab took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edge of the bench. "My name isn't really Hawa. Zainab. Zainab Adegok." Tunde blinked, confused. "Adegok? As in?" "Yes," Zainab said quickly, her voice trembling. "My father is Chief Adegok, the real estate billionaire. I'm his daughter." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Tunde stared at her, his expression unreadable. "I came here because I wanted to live a simple life," Zainab continued, her voice cracking. "I was tired of being treated like some spoiled rich girl. I wanted to prove to myself that I could survive without my father's money. That's why I've been working here. Why I didn't tell anyone who I really am." Tunde's jaw tightened and his hands balled into fists. "So all this time you've been lying to me?" "It wasn't a lie," Zainab said desperately. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want you to see me differently." Tunde stood abruptly, his eyes flashing with anger. "But you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. You let me believe you were just like the rest of us, struggling to make ends meet. And all along, you were a billionaire's daughter playing waitress." "It wasn't like that," Zainab said, tears streaming down her face. "I wasn't playing. I was trying to find myself." Tunde shook his head, stepping back. "You don't understand, Zainab. Do you know how hard my life has been? How much I've struggled to build something for myself? And you've had everything handed to you. And you still couldn't be honest with me." "Tunde, please," Zainab pleaded, her voice breaking. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. Tunde's expression softened for a moment, but then he shook his head again. I need time to think, he said quietly. I can't do this right now. He turned and walked away, leaving Zainab sitting on the bench, her heart shattered. The days that followed were some of the hardest of Zainab's life. She went to work every day, but Tunde didn't show up at the buka. The lively conversations and teasing that once made her days brighter were gone, replaced by an emptiness she couldn't shake. Blessing noticed the change in her. No wait Zainab, she said one afternoon, pulling her aside. What's going on? You've been like a ghost these past few days. Zainab sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. I told Tunde the truth about who I really am. Blessing's eyes widened. You mean he didn't know? No, Zainab said quietly. And now I think I've lost him. Blessing shook her head, her usual sharp tone softening. You're braver than I thought, girl. Telling the truth takes guts. If he really cares about you, he'll come around. Zainab nodded, though she wasn't sure if she believed it. 1 week later, Tunde walked into the buka. Zainab's heart leapt when she saw him, but she forced herself to stay calm. He looked different, tired, as if he hadn't slept much. He sat at his usual table, and Zainab hesitated for a moment before walking over. 1 week later, Tunde walked into the buka. Zainab's heart leapt when she saw him, but she forced herself to stay calm. He looked different, tired, as if he hadn't slept much. He sat at his usual table, and Zainab hesitated for a moment before walking over. Hi, she said softly, setting a glass of water in front of him. Hi, Tunde replied, his voice quiet. There was a long silence between them before Tunde finally spoke. I've been thinking a lot about what you told me. Zainab nodded, her hands trembling. And? She asked quietly. Tunde looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and something else, something softer. I was angry. I felt betrayed. But I also realized that you didn't have to tell me the truth. You could have kept hiding. But you didn't. I couldn't, Zainab said, her voice breaking. You mean too much to me, Tunde. I didn't want to lose you. Tunde took a deep breath. I care about you too, Zainab. But I need to know, was the competition, was it rigged? Did you help me win? Zainab's heart sank. I made sure you had a chance to compete. But everything else was you, Tunde. Your plan, your presentation, it was all you. Tunde stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I believe you. Relief washed over Zainab, but it was quickly replaced by uncertainty. Does this mean, can we start over? Tunde smiled faintly. I don't know if we can start over. But we can try to move forward. You're not just some billionaire's daughter to me, Zainab. You're the person who stood by me when no one else did. And I'll never forget that. Zainab felt a tear slide down her cheek as she smiled back at him. Thank you, Tunde. As they sat together, talking quietly, the buka buzzed with life around them. Zainab didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. Tunde reached across the table and took her hand, his grip warm and steady. We'll figure it out, he said softly. And in that moment, Zainab believed him. The end. This story teaches us that running away from our problems doesn't solve them. It only delays the truth. Real growth comes when we face our fears honestly. It also reminds us that trust is the foundation of any meaningful relationship, and once broken, it takes time, patience, and genuine effort to rebuild. Most importantly, it shows us that true love sees beyond wealth and status. It values character, honesty, and the courage to be vulnerable. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to Folktale Dawn for more incredible African stories that inspire, entertain, and teach powerful life lessons. Until next time, stay blessed.